Hello, everyone. My name is Tanisha Nunn Gary, and I am the President and CEO of the African American Chamber of Commerce of Central Florida. Welcome, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar, part one of our three-part bootcamp series, Retool, Recover, and Restore. Today is part one, where we will learn about retooling your business. You will hear from two very dynamic speakers, Paul Shelton and Chris Leggett. Thank you to our chamber trustee, Wells Fargo, who is sponsoring all three parts of this boot camp. So today, representing Wells Fargo, we have Mr. Will Stamper. Born and raised in Jacksonville, Florida, he worked his way up the corporate ladder during his earlier years in the world of technology. In doing this, he earned a career working for Sprint as a retail sales manager. During this 7-year stint, Will became the youngest sales manager to receive the Presidential Sales Manager Award. This is where his career path would take a shift. He was received by the banking industry and has been in financial services ever since. Will was recruited by a large bank as banks were making a shift into retail banking. Will came into the banking industry as a branch manager with no financial background. He soon worked his way up to vice president and on to senior vice president. While at the organization, Will had great success winning multiple awards, including the National Excellence Award. Will was later recruited by another large bank where he was senior vice president for 5 years. He is currently the visible representation of small business for Wells Fargo in the Central Florida community as a vice president in business development. Thank you so much for joining us, Mr. Stamper, and for being the moderator of our webinar. At this time, I will turn it over to you to introduce our speakers.
Thank you. Good morning to everyone. I first like to start by acknowledging the African American Chamber for Central Florida and Tanisha Gary for their presence and their leadership in Central Florida. The leadership and the important works of empowering our Black businesses is something that we truly value. I am so excited today to be a part of this company, and I tell you the joy it brings me to see this partnership come together to provide our communities the support it needs and deserves during these special times. The initiatives like the R3 Bootcamp, where together over the next few months, we will focus over retool, restore, recover, and help you navigate through and past COVID-19. And on the behalf of Wells Fargo, we say thank you to the great work of the African American Chamber of Central Florida and taking the steps towards making that hopefulness of the future a reality. And thank you, each and every single one of you, for what you do with small business owners to help support the thriving community. I encourage you all to take advantage of these sessions over the next few months. But today, it's my pleasure to introduce our presenters for the session. Our first presenter of the day will be Paul Z. Shelton, the founder and chief investment officer of Warwick Shores Advisors. In his role as the Chief Investment Officer, Paul provided thought leadership, portfolio management for the firm. Paul is tasked with its asset management and also the firm's investment strategies, as well as the quantitative and fundamental economic research. So, Mr. Paul, the floor is yours, sir, and I'm excited to hear your presentation.
All right, good morning, everyone. How's everyone doing? I assume doing well today. Making sure everyone can see and hear me. If you can, give me a thumbs up, Will, if you can hear me, see me. All right, sounds good. So today I want to talk about retooling. This is the first part of our three-part series on here, and retooling for success. And exactly what does it mean to retool for success and how to go about retooling our organizations. Since the beginning of this pandemic, since it's hit us or come upon our shores back in February of this year, we've been hit with the onslaught of so many different things and so many ramifications from the pandemic, dealing with the economics of the recession, dealing with the mental economics of social unrest that has been taking place during our country, and then dealing with also a lot of depression and some of the other soft intangibles that take place whenever we go through an economic downturn like we see right now. So as we get started and move forward through this conversation, I want to go to our next slide here and kind of give you this comment here on what we should really think about, or what we should take for this next segment as our parting words to move forward with. So your company is the spaceship partially powered down. Your recovery is your power up sequence, which includes hundreds of decisions about which activities to restart. Now, this is something that is very crucial. If you can think about your company as your organization as a spaceship, and it's powered down, it's trying to re-enter the atmosphere, is trying to get back to Earth, and you have to make some important decisions as you're trying to land this spaceship, as to when to power up and when to power down certain things and certain activities in your company. Your mission is to retool the company in order to emerge as a winner after this pandemic. So that really entails turning on the right buttons in the right order, which is very important. And just as important as that is leaving the wrong buttons turned off. So there's a lot of things that we'll have to do, a lot of things that we have to reevaluate internally within our organizations to make sure that we are still achieving our goals. And we're going to talk about that right now. If we can go to the next slide. The first thing that we should do, and the first thing that is recommended to do whenever we start the retooling process, is to take a pulse check. Understand where we are. Many business owners, like myself, went through a very volatile period at the onset of the pandemic. And after initially performing triage to stabilize your organization, the next steps is to take a temperature and pulse check of your firm. Kind of get a reading of where you are today. We're all are. If you're in Florida and understand anything about hurricane season, you understand when those hurricanes come through, after the wind stop, after the rain stop, and the sun reemerges, the first thing we do is we go outside and we take a pulse check and see how everything is looking, and we assess the damage. So that's the next thing we can do. If we can move to that next slide, there is assess the damage. Have a clear understanding of the state of your business and the state of your industry. This is something that is very, very important as we are in a very dynamic and changing time in our globe and in history, I should say. So having that clear understanding of the state of your business and the state of industry will allow you to position your business for success. The current COVID environment has changed many aspects in which we operate our businesses. Technology has become the medium of connection for many arms within businesses internally, and has also become the primary means for communication with our clients and with our customers. Understanding what the regulations are for your business from a governmental and industry regulatory standpoint will play an instrumental role in being able to navigate the road ahead. So some of the important questions that we really have to ask as we're moving forward, and we can't be afraid to ask these questions. And those questions involve, is my organization relevant in this new environment? So much has changed over, I should say, the last 8 months, in life for us. No one envisioned coming into 2020 that we would be in the midst of a pandemic. It's been 102 years since the last time we've seen a pandemic or realized a pandemic globally. So this is something that has not been in the works for many generations. So this is a first for everyone. So understanding, is my organization still relevant in this new environment currently where we are today? Are we operating within the current industry norms? Is there something that has shifted in our industry? Prior to 2020 and over the last 2 years, there's been a large shift, which has been named a retail apocalypse, where many stores are shifting from brick and mortar to more e-commerce. And is this something that's being expedited in our industry as a result of the pandemic? And if so, how do we take control of that? How do we take charge and move forward in the best way, in the best manner? Move to the next slide. So COVID-19, the road ahead, which is extremely, extremely unpredictable. How do we prepare for a highly unpredictable post-COVID-19 world? Now, this is the million-dollar question. This is what everyone wants to know. Unfortunately, this is the hardest thing to answer because we do not know what the post-COVID-19 world looks like. We have an idea of what some of the things may be, or some of the atoms, or I should say items and aspects of what the post-COVID-19 world would look like when it comes to PPE and addressing our clients, but we really just don't know exactly going forward in 2021, 22, 23, and therefore and after, what exactly the world is going to look like. So it's very important that we prepare for something that you can't see and can't foresee. So we have to prepare for as many aspects of life as possible. As we transition through the first pandemic, realized, like I said before, in many generations, it's clear that things will not be the same going forward as they were prior to 2020. It is vital that each organizational leader address the pressing concerns of operations and make those tough decisions as to what to turn back on and what to leave turned off, as I mentioned before. The decisions should be led purely on the stance of current and future financial stability of each firm. If the manufacturing of a widget takes place in a separate factory from the manufacturing of a widget, then it's very possible that you would have to merge those manufacturers together. A lot of times we've seen that we have economies of scale when we're able to utilize different factories or different systems to accomplish a common goal. But where we are emerging from this COVID-19 world and the financial impact that this pandemic has placed upon us, there is a high need and a high probability that we would have to really reevaluate a lot of things that we do internally as an organization to make sure that we're moving forward in the right direction. And this same concept is true when it comes to software applications that are utilized within each firm. Identifying overlapping software or even business units can allow the firm to strengthen operations while reducing overhead costs, essentially seeking those economies of scale all over again. So this is something that it's hard sometimes for many organizations. As when you first launch your business, when you first start your organization, you are tasked with developing economies of scales, developing software, developing, in the chain of operations and things that you do. But it often comes that you have to go back now and rewrite the script. And this is very unfortunate. So what decisions should be made regarding services and products offered and consumed within your business? So with that being the case, some of the products and services that were suspended as a result of COVID-19 should potentially stay disengaged going forward. Now is a great time really to RFP and really look into all those internal services to seek a comparable or reduced cost option. Many of these services for many organizations includes the accounting services, any third-party or outsourced payroll services, retirement plan, 401k services. It could be potentially possible that you can reduce the cost within your 401k plans at this time. And additionally, any janitorial services that takes place with the company. So as you begin to retool, as you begin to drive and restart those businesses, it's very, very important that you look at all of these costs and look at everything and see if there's a way that you can reposition the firm, reposition the spaceship so it can be as nimble as possible, as financially literate as possible moving forward so they can make the right prudent decisions. We can go to the next slide, please. So the next thing you want to do, and this is after you've had that pulse check, is to really revisit the organizational mission of the firm. Now, every company One of the first things we do when we start a company is we have that thought process or the mentality of what our company is going to look like. We have the vision of what it will turn into at 3 years, 5 years, 10 years down the road. And whether you have written down your mission statement officially or not, you have that vision and you have that mission of what your organization will look like. So it's very important that as you have this mission, that you revisit it right now to make sure that it is still relevant in today's environment. We can go to the next slide. It talks about having a guided mission and staying focused to that mission. So in addition to having your initial mission statement, one of the things that's paramount in retooling your company is creating a guided mission, or really revisiting that your original mission statement and see if you're still fulfilling that and if you're still able to stay focused to that mission in the new environment that we are in right now. Second thing is to review how your business strategized and how it met its mission before COVID-19. It's very possible that going forward in 2020 and after that you will have to, restructure how you meet your mission and possibly shift up some things internally and externally to continue to meet your mission going forward. We'll go to the next slide, please. So with that being the thought process, the first thing or one of the things you should do next is evaluate the organization and will it meet its mission going forward, and how will it meet its mission going forward? And the best way to do this is to develop a plan to achieve your mission considering the new norms in our environment as of right now. So some of those new norms could be based on government regulation. Are there any regulatory changes that has taken place in the industry that is causing my organization and my firm to not operate in the same manner in which it did prior to COVID-19? And how do I address any of those governmental regulations or any of those industry regulations that may be levied upon my industry or levied upon my company specifically? How do I take care of these regulations financially? How do they impact me from being able to hire new employees? How does it impact me from communicating and how I communicate with my team internally and how I communicate with my clients and customers? Next, we have to really address the capacity of our firm, the capacity of our organization to be able to achieve its mission. Do we have the capacity at this point? Do we have the manpower? Do we have enough hands on deck to be able to achieve our mission? Are we able to reach our clients in the same effective way as we did before? Do we need necessarily a brick and mortar store, or are we able to utilize e-commerce and Zoom to carry out the mission of the firm? So that's something that is very important to look at next. And lastly, one of the things to look at with developing and carrying out your mission is the demand for your services. Has demand shifted as a result of COVID-19? What does demand look like now as opposed to before COVID-19? And is this a temporary setback, or is this something that's going to be more so permanent going forward as we shift through this pandemic into the new norm that we will realize? And the next steps on here, and this is something that you should do after you take that pulse check and after you discuss your organizational mission, and that is to organize your execution steps. So develop that plan on really how to move forward and what steps you should take to really retool your business and to get it moving in the right direction, the direction that you want it moving in. So on the next slide, I speak about defining the first steps of that mission. So essentially, our journey is already laid out for us. The journey has been defined because we know we have already completed the triage of our companies and our organizations. We see where we currently stand as we are 8 months into this pandemic, and we kind of have a glimpse of what the road will look like ahead as we move forward through this pandemic. So the journey is pretty much laid out. Now we need to really put together a roadmap to help us reach our goals now that we have that journey identified for us. And as CEOs and as leaders of our organizations, the best way to really put together this roadmap is by doing the following things. And the first one is to create a focus group to identify the direction in the obstacles that may stand in the way of that direction. Now, there's several reasons why this focus group is instrumental for an organization, and I'll speak to those in a little bit as we get further along in this presentation. But having that focus group will allow you to divide and conquer the responsibilities of the firm and move forward as a team, as opposed to having to burden the weight of everything all at one time as the leader of the organization. Second thing is accept all ideas and challenges of internal and external advisors. Now, advisors can include senior staff and also key clients. So it doesn't have to just be those stakeholders that are invested in the firm financially. So make sure that you're taking time to understand the ideas, even if it's an idea that's not going to be implemented. Understand the idea. Make sure that that idea is embraced in the organization, and see if it does fit and see where it does fit. And if it does, and if it has a place, what are those challenges that could be faced internally and externally as those ideas arise to help you prepare and retool your organization. And lastly, as the leader, map the journey with the given input received from those advisors. So all the input that you receive, whether it's going to be used, implemented, or not used and implemented, make sure that you organize those as part of the map going forward, whether it's a 1 year, 3 year, 5 year plan. Put those together and understand what milestones that need to be reached as you go forth in this journey and as you move down the map. The next thing here is mapping out the journey. So essentially, as the captain of the ship or as the leader of a team, it is important to really drive the organization and move it forward in the direction of service mission and the service community. So you're thinking about as a captain of a ship, it is important to enter the coordinates and engage the team strategically. I went on a cruise a year ago, and my daughter was 4 years old at the time, and we were eating dinner, and the captain of the ship came by, and the captain came by, took pictures, and was eating dinner with us, and my daughter was excited to meet the captain. And when he left, she asked one very simple question to me, and she said, "Dad, are we safe?" And I said, "Yes, babe, we're safe." And she says, "Well, if the captain is here, who's driving the ship?" So that helped me realize that one, that I have a little business tycoon that's brewing, and two, that it is very important for the mission of the captain and of the leader of the organization to be disseminated across the organization so that there can be a clear picture of where we are going. Now, my daughter being 4 years old, she would not capture the vision and know the coordinates and understand that there's other team members and other teammates that are, actually running the ship. But it's very important for us as CEOs and as leaders of our organization to really enter those coordinates, put together that map, put together that roadmap that we're going to follow, and really educate and engage our team strategically at the times that they need to be engaged, to be able to buy into the process and be able to carry the mission forward. So none of our team members ever ask the question, are we safe? We never want that to happen. We want our ships to move forward. We want our organizations to move forward and fulfill the missions that they need to fill. So in moving forward and fulfilling those missions and fulfilling that journey on that roadmap here, the values and the culture to achieve the goals should be laid out along the way for stakeholders to capture and engage. And the stakeholders, it does not refer to those that are invested in the organization, but it also encompasses those rank and file employees, management, and the soft capital such as technology and software that's used within the organization. There should be a clear map in place where each stakeholder knows when to engage and when not to engage. And it's very important that they know when not to engage, because you don't want to have anyone that should be serving dinner driving the ship, if you can understand it from that standpoint. Developing those subgroups that can take ownership of the smaller tasks are very important. As I mentioned before, the divide and conquer mindset would allow the leader to not get burned out during the process. And one thing that is very important to understand is that as CEOs and as leaders of our organization, when we're at work and when we're at our desk, we take on that role of dealing with the pandemic. But it's so much more than just dealing with the pandemic. There comes a point in time where we have to take off that CEO hat, and we have to put on the hat as a husband, we put on the hat as a father, as a sister, as a brother, and we step back into our communities and we step back into our homes, and we're no longer dealing with the pandemic at that time. We're dealing with the coronavirus. And if you can understand the difference in that, dealing with the pandemic from a corporate standpoint and how to steer your corporation and how to steer the ship of your business, but dealing with the pandemic, dealing with the coronavirus from an individual level, from a 1,000-foot level, on how you're accepting it and how you're dealing with anything that's going on around you, are two separate different things. So it's very, very important and very key as you retool your business and move forward, that you have those subgroups and those subcommittees that are there to help the leader, help the CEO through the process so that he or she will not get burned out, and that they're able to really, really focus on the macro themes of the company and have those subgroups focus on those 1,000-foot levels and those micro things that they're able to look at and drill down in. In addition to that, those subgroups can really forecast and really see any potential harm that may be ahead in that particular lane. So this is something that is extremely, extremely important. So next was the rebranding your thought process. And as the slide says here, is to change the corporate mentality. So accept that business in the world has changed. Sometimes that's one of the hardest things for us to do, is to accept that things are different and that they will no longer be the same as they were. As leaders of organizations, we map out everything. Oftentimes we're drivers, we're analytical. We put together numbers and we understand that things have to work as we have designed them to, and as the numbers have told us that they would work. But whenever something happens that is outside of that, such as a pandemic, we have to really sit back and be able to accept that things have changed. We have to accept that business is not the same as it was prior to the pandemic. And how do we accept that change, and how do we move forward with that? Because for the vast majority of businesses and industries, the way we operated in the old days has changed permanently. We have to be able to accept that change, and at the top of the organization, and move that acceptance downstream throughout the organization. And this goes back to what I mentioned before about the captain being able to disseminate his message and his mission through every level and every chain of the organization. CEOs can use the current climate to lock in new behaviors. Now, so this is something that could be met with a lot of resistance. And oftentimes, whenever you see change and whenever you think about change in your organization or anywhere, it is often met with, resistance across multiple levels. So in this Zoom world that we're in, we often have to trust our teammates and trust our employees that they are making the right decisions at all times. We don't have the luxury of being able to sit next to many of our teammates or many of our employees at this time. And in certain situations, we don't have that luxury. And many of our employees and many of our teammates don't have the luxury of leaning over to the next cubicle and asking someone next to them a question, or leaning into the cubicle of their manager and seeking resources, from their manager, or guidance from that manager on how to answer a client's question, or how to deal with any concern that could arise in the course of everyday business. In today's environment, that manager that they would lean over to may very well be on another call themselves, or they could be operating as a fourth grade teacher, which I have done, and I've operated as a first grade teacher. So we're in a new environment. Everything has changed. How do we accept that change? How do we embrace that change to make our organization stronger and move forward in the right direction? Many internal leaders have stopped being protective, defensive, and political, and now take the fast, good decision route on behalf of their organizations. So when we're in the old days, I should say, where we're sitting in our brick and mortar, where we're in our offices, um, a lot of times there's a lot of politics that go on in the office politics, you know, all the way down to the coffee machine. And then there's a lot of protective instruments that take place when it comes to the social science of employee management. A lot of times managers are often tasked with how do I do the correct thing? How do I protect myself from going to HR, having to go to HR? In this new Zoom world that we are in, those issues are still there, but they're not as prevalent um, from a physical area, from a physical standpoint. So how do we move forward with that aspect and knowing that we're steering our ships in the right direction, knowing that our team members are making the right decisions, even when managers are not in office and when they're not next to you, and knowing that we're all taking ownership and accountability within the organization. The next slide, the next session really deals a little bit more with answering that question. So you have to hear and listen to change. This is where something is very important. And I'll repeat that again. We have to hear and listen to change. And this is not necessarily hearing and listening to our key stakeholders, or hearing or listening to any one of those that are invested in our company, but we have to listen to change itself. And what does change sound like? Oftentimes change does verbally reach us through our team members, through our employees, but that may not necessarily always be the case for change. So engaging your team, engaging them on all levels, engage your staff on all levels, not just at the senior management, but all the way up and down horizontally and vertically throughout the organization, making sure that everyone understands the mission, everyone understands where we are, and everyone understands how we're moving forward in that process. Listen to the concerns of the essentials workers and of the organization and garner their input. This is something that is very important because many of our employees and many of our team members are on the front line, those that are client facing, that may be face to face to our customers and dealing with them, have significant concerns about the healthcare ramifications of the pandemic that we are in currently. Being able to embody those concerns and drive the communication and the conversation with the employees on a 1,000-foot level and on a macro level will really help engage those employees in the process of moving forward and retooling the company. It will really give them ownership and that accountability that we look for, and pushing them forward in the organization and helping us push our mission forward to our clients and to our community. Lastly, is to refresh the agenda of the CEO. So this is something that has kind of been the central theme throughout the conversation thus far. But understanding where we are currently in our pandemic and understanding where your business is currently in the life cycle, I should say, of our business cycle. We're really drive a lot of the rebranding and the refreshing of the CEO's agenda. If we move to the next slide, we talk about the retooling journey can significantly change the CEO's agenda. And as I mentioned before, our mission statement that we wrote pre-pandemic and that we lived up to pre-pandemic may have shifted. There may be some adjustments that may be needed. to that mission statement. There may be some adjustments that are needed to that agenda. As the organization embarks on retooling, it is important to know that the process will significantly change. There will be resistance horizontally and vertically, as I mentioned before, throughout the organization. However, change is never absent resistance. And oftentimes, resistance should be embraced by the organization to bring about the most purest aspects of change. The 60-40 CEO rule states that CEOs will have 60% of their agenda determined by their job, but it's critical that they free up the other 40% to focus on the changing of the company. This 40% includes retooling. So as a leader and as the leader of your organization, it is important to visualize the direction in which you want to go. Understand that you are playing offense at this moment right now as you retool your company, and that you are preparing to be a sturdier, more efficient for your internal and external clients as you move forward. And that concludes my portion of the presentation for today.
Awesome presentation. I got a lot of takeaways from there. Under the retooling of your organization, where you spoke about the journey has been defined. Now we need a map to reach our goals, which that speaks volumes. So I'm going to use that future. So I'm going to ask your permission for that right now. Thank you, sir. So I'm scrolling through our questions to see if there's anything there. And so far, there's no questions. So I'll give it a few more minutes. But again, like I said, that's one of my takeaways that I'm going to use. And then also, what's the other one? Guided your mission. Stay focused to your mission. You can always have a mission, but if you don't stay focused and revisit that focus mission, that mission is irrelevant, basically, because you're not staying on task looking at that constantly. So those two things is something I want to do in my personal life, and also as I'm speaking to clients to actually use that as a kind of like a segue to kind of let them know this is what you need to do to plan. Then also with your business, do you do that type of consultant type of work as well?
Not necessarily, but that's not my core mission, I should say, as what I do for the business. But I do whenever I'm working with business owners and we're developing their estate plans, succession planning, and things of that nature. That does come into play. And the core services that we provide are investment management services, wealth management services. But when it comes to organizations and dealing with CEOs and business owners, it's very important that just as we review their estate plan on an annual basis, that they review their mission of their organization on an annual basis and see if they're coinciding and working together, moving forward in the right direction.
Awesome. So there's not a question, but there is a comment here. It says, critical is the key. The pause is our daily flow was not planned. It was happened. And if I scroll down, it says, it's up to us to restart with the same energy we had when we first started our business. Could you speak to that a little?
Yes, and I missed the first part of that, but he said it was
critical thinking is the key.
Critical thinking.
Yeah.
Critical thinking is definitely the key, and that's what allows a lot of the creativity to be born to deal with the uncertainty that can come about when we're reaching times of volatility like we're in right now. One of the biggest fears that many CEOs and business owners have is just the future, the uncertainty. It's hard to answer those questions about things that we're uncertain about. So if we have that opportunity to think critically and to really be able to be nimble in our mindset, it allows us to really prepare for that retooling process.
Absolutely. Well, again, I thank you for your presentation. I thank you for joining us today. You're welcome. Now, hopefully you will.
I will.
Okay, and I'm going to get ready to introduce our next speaker. which is Chris Leggett. He's a program manager with Central Florida International Trade Office. As a program manager, Chris leads the efforts to help business in Central Florida take advantage of the opportunities available from importing to exporting. Mr. Chris, how are you doing this morning?
I am terrific now that I'm off mute.
All right, sir, the floor is yours. And I believe you're controlling.
I had something a moment ago saying that I was a presenter, but it's not letting me share the screen right now. And I think I have control now. Can people see my screen?
Yes, sir. Everything looks good.
Okay, great. Well, thank you very much. I would first like to express my appreciation to the African American Chamber, which is one of our friends who are at the National Entrepreneur Center, which is where we're normally working out of. But COVID has changed many things, and we're just starting to get reopened there. But I'd like to thank them for inviting me today to speak to this issue in terms of how to retool, how to grow your business through international trade. And I'd also like to thank Wells Fargo for sponsoring this event. It's really great to see how so many partners are really stepping up to help businesses around Central Florida to survive and grow. So in terms of what I'd like you to get out of this presentation today, I'm not expecting that anybody would be in a position after this to be able to start exporting. It's not something simple, but what I want you to do is start having a conversation, asking yourself the right questions about whether international trade, whether exporting is a way that you might be able to survive and recover from the epidemic that we're experiencing. So in this presentation, I'll talk a little bit about what is CFITO, talk about why you should be thinking about exporting, what you need to do in order to start exporting, and how CFITO and the other service providers can help connect your business to a world of opportunities. A little bit about ourselves. We were founded a little over 6 years ago by a partnership between JP Morgan Chase and Orange County government in order to achieve 3 primary objectives. One is to have somewhere that businesses can go to learn about importing because there's no real services offered by government in that field. But there was a recognition that this is a topic that is important to local businesses. You only have to think about all those businesses that are down selling souvenirs on iDrive that were probably imported from somewhere else. That creates jobs, that adds value to the local economy, and they need assistance as well. Another was to help businesses that are not yet ready to export to become ready to export. Again, that's something that some of the services that are available weren't able to provide. And then the third is to work with the mayor of Orange County and now the mayor of the city of Orlando, which has joined as a funding partner at CFITO, to have an option other than to say yes or no when it comes to invitations to meet with them to talk about various trade-related issues. If they have a business delegation coming in, it might not be something they can have on their agenda, but now they have someone to be able to provide something for the people to learn about Central Florida and to help provide an agenda for them if they're coming to look about doing more business here. And our vision is to be the hub of international trade activity in Central Florida. We're a connector. We won't necessarily have every single answer, but we're going to be able to get you to them. And I'll talk a little bit more about this later on. But first and foremost, I want to talk to you about why your business should consider exporting. And there's 2 numbers that I always like to talk about, and that is that 95% of consumers in the world live outside the US, and 3/4 of global wealth is outside the United States. So these are really big numbers, and it's a market that you really cannot ignore if you're looking to grow your business. Profitability, we oftentimes can get a premium for a product that is made in the USA. That is a terrific brand. It stands for innovation, for quality, and that's something that you can piggyback on when you're looking to export and possibly get a higher price abroad than you would be able to expect here. Risk mitigation is another reason for getting into exporting. Particularly right now, you don't want to be dependent on just one buyer, and the same goes for markets. I'm sure most businesses are looking to find new markets for their product or service, and doing this outside the US is just another natural step for a business. You are also going to potentially be able to use more of your capacity if you've got excess capacity in your business, whether it be manufacturing or providing services. This is a great way to fully utilize that capacity. It can also help extend the product life for your product, in terms of there may be products that you provide that are not necessarily as popular anymore in the U.S. They still may be very popular and sell very well outside the U.S. So really getting to know those other markets is going to be really important for your business. It also can help smooth out business cycles. If you make a seasonal product, for example, bathing suits, even in Florida, those aren't going to sell as well year-round as they will in specific seasons. Well, when it's summer here, it's going to be winter somewhere else, and conversely, it will be summer when it's winter. So you'll be able to sell your products more easily year-round than you may at the moment by focusing only on the United States. You can also become more competitive by selling abroad. You're going to learn lessons from that experience. It's a really great way to get to think differently. That's one experience that I've had coming originally from Canada and seeing the US from an outside view, is that oftentimes businesses might think that, well, this is the way we do it in the US, and this is the way we need to do it everywhere in the world. But when they find out, well, no, that doesn't actually work, and come back to the US and take those lessons that they've learned about how to sell into different markets, it can make you more competitive here. And then finally, engaging in international trade can help increase the value of your intellectual property, and in fact, the value of your business, if you are at all looking to sell the business in the future. I'll just give a quick word. I'm going to focus on exporting, but just to talk about why importing is important as well. A lot of people think of if you're importing, that means you're actually exporting a job abroad, and I won't pretend that doesn't happen, but there are benefits from importing. It helps you manage risks in terms of if you have to source components for your product. You don't want to be dependent on a single provider. That does have its benefits, having that kind of relationship, but you really want to have a backup plan in case, as we know in Florida, if a hurricane comes through and all of a sudden your provider can't produce for 2-3 months as they rebuild, and particularly if you're working just in time, you've got a problem there. You really don't want to be scrambling at that point in time to find a new source of inputs. It helps improve your competitiveness. Sometimes having that 1 or 2 components to a product that's built here in the USA is what's going to make your product competitive, both domestically and internationally. We have to be realistic, and in terms of, we do produce very high quality products in the United States, very reliable products. However, sometimes they can be expensive, and that component can be what is going to maybe get you the sale somewhere abroad. And finally, meeting customer demand is important as well. We can't make absolutely everything in the United States, and so there may be things that are unavailable. It also helps families stretch their budgets. So importing is important, and I'm always happy to talk to businesses about how they can benefit from importing and how they can get started importing. So now I'd like to talk a little bit about the numbers that we're talking about here, because a lot of people will understand generally that international trade is important, but they don't actually know what it means to their local community. And Florida is the #8 exporting state in the US, with $154 billion flowing through Florida's airports and seaports. And of that, 56 is Florida origin goods that were being exported. The difference between some of these numbers is we're a coastal state, and so a lot of products will come in here in Florida and then end up in another state and not really have a connection to Florida other than the fact that they came in. So as you can see, it's a really big exporting state. Some of our key exports are computers and electronics, transportation equipment, chemicals and machinery. So these really are high value products. It's not just oranges and beef that define our economy. And just to mention as well, I'll be talking primarily about the export of goods. It's a lot easier to get data and information on that. Services like tourism obviously are really important to our local economy as well as to the Florida economy as a whole, but I'm really just talking about goods here. Some of our top markets are primarily in the Americas, so Brazil, Canada, Mexico, Colombia, Chile, and then the United Kingdom is our #6 market. And we also imported into the state $81.3 billion in goods. It's a great variety of products, automobiles, gold, electrical parts, aircraft. You can see here in the presentation, which is going to be shared with all of you who've registered for the event afterwards. So you don't have to worry about getting everything down right now. If you find some information that's particularly relevant for you, you'll get it. Top sources, it comes from China, obviously, some of our neighbors, so Mexico, Canada, Brazil, and then some of the European countries. And I just put this in here to show, it's a heat map that shows which are the most important exporting states. So you'll see the traditional ones like Florida, California, New York, Ohio, Illinois. So we're in really good company in terms of what we're exporting out of that $1.6 trillion that the United States exports in 2018. We've been very fortunate to be able to partner with Enterprise Florida to get some data at the county level. And what you're seeing here on the map, it again is a heat map, and you can see when I'm talking about Central Florida, I'm talking about the Orlando, Kissimmee, Sanford Metropolitan Statistical Area, which is basically Lake, Orange, Osceola, and Seminole counties. And so we're not among the very top exporters, but combined, it's really important with $3.6 billion in exports. Our key markets are primarily in the Americas, so we're shipping to people who are near us. So that is a great advantage we have, but also it shows that we have a lot of potential to grow more by accessing markets like Europe, like Africa, like Asia. And we're exporting high value products as well. It's again not low value, low margin products that we're exporting. I mean, industrial machinery, computers and electronic products, optical equipment, plastics. These are all things that we're exporting from the region, and they're really going all around the world. Again, here's a heat map that shows in the dark purple our primary markets. So the Americas, to a lesser extent, Europe, though if you count the European Union as a single market, then that actually is our largest export market. And Australia and China are really big trade partners for us. So maybe you're thinking after all this, okay, that's really interesting, but why does this matter? Well, exports create jobs. Every $1 billion has been estimated by the International Trade Administration that they create 5,700 well-paying jobs. And when you take that down to the Florida perspective, in 2017, approximately 230,000 manufacturing jobs in Florida were supported by international trade, and that's 1 in 7 manufacturing jobs that are depending on exports. And these are well-paying jobs. Again, the International Trade Administration has estimated that earnings in export-intensive manufacturing industries are 16.3% higher on average than industries where exports were 10% or less than their total sales. So with that, maybe you're asking, can your business export? And yes, really, any business can export. If you can sell your product anywhere in the US, then you can think about exporting it as well. You know, there's obviously going to be some businesses that don't lend themselves particularly well to exports. I mean, if you're really just looking at a local presence for a restaurant, well, that's probably not going to be something that's easily exported. But if you're looking to franchise, then, you know, again, if you can sell it in the US, you can look at exporting it. And maybe we'll talk first a little bit about some of the myths about exporting and how reality is for those issues. So a lot of companies, maybe you're thinking, I'm too small to go global. Well, nearly 42% of all US exporters have fewer than 19 employees. So we're talking about small businesses that are exporting and that are prospering by exporting. You might be thinking, well, selling outside the US is too risky. Well, there are policies available to help manage the risk of getting paid. For example, the Export-Import Bank, Exim Bank, or the Small Business Administration, SBA, have insurance programs to help ensure that you will get paid at the end of the day. And maybe you're thinking, my domestic market is secure, I don't need to export. Well, I think everybody who's on here, your experience has been over the past 8 months that no, we can't depend on this business here. And also I'd remind you that your foreign competitors are not going to be holding back. They're looking to get into other markets, including potential export markets for you, as well as the United States. And if they're getting more competitive in all of those markets, well, this is something that you really need to have on your radar screen. Maybe you might be thinking that your product or service won't sell well outside the US. But as I was talking a little bit about earlier, Made in the US is a really great brand, and it has never been stronger. And finally, the number one myth is exporting is too complicated. I'll be the first to admit it's scary getting started exporting. However, CFITO is here, and there are so many other service providers, some of whom I'll talk about shortly, that are there to help. You're not going to be on your own in this process. I was like what the NEC's motto is, that you're in business for yourself, not by yourself. Same thing for exports. So the first thing to start talking about is whether you're ready to export. And it might sound really basic, but you're going to need a product or service to sell. You really need to come up with that idea first. I'll occasionally get people coming in to see me who say, like, well, what can I export or what can I import? But you really have an idea of what market you want to supply and how you're going to supply it. And that includes, for some of the service providers, they're going to want to work only with companies that are export ready and can show that they've got a track record of making a product or delivering a service. Also, for most of the service providers, the product will need to be made in the USA, and that doesn't mean 100% made in the US, but basically more than half of the value of the product is made in the US. Or for Enterprise Florida, they're going to look at whether the product is made in Florida. Most of the time, if you have a business that might be owned by someone who's outside Florida or outside the US, that doesn't really matter. It's really where the product is made. Another issue will be identifying your goals for exporting and having a plan to achieve them. We heard that from Paul about how important it is for your business to have a mission and a plan. Same thing goes for exporting. You have to understand what you're expecting to get out of it, and then have metrics to define whether you're actually meeting those goals. You really need to have management commitment. If it's your business, obviously you're going to have that buy-in. But if you're just part of a management team or you're a salesperson, you really need to have that buy-in, because this is not an easy process. It's going to demand investment, and there's no point finding a market and then finding out that leadership is just not interested in selling outside the U.S. And potentially you'll have to go and explain to them why this is in their benefit, and do that kind of a sales job. Next, in terms of issues to deal with, you want to make sure you've got your finances in order, that you have the resources for this. You might need to increase capacity. Well, do you have the funding for that? There are programs, actually, if you are needing to increase capacity in order to meet export demand. Sometimes banks won't be interested in funding capacity that's going to be for foreign sales. So the SBA and Exim Bank have programs for that. You're going to need a budget for selling abroad. Even though right now so much is going to be done virtually, over the longer term, you're going to want to be doing international travel, going to the markets that you're serving, talking to people there, going to trade shows. Trade shows are one of the best ways to learn about where you can sell your products. And to meet other people in the industry, customers, potential suppliers, find out what other competitors are doing. You might be looking for a distributor. That's a great place to meet them. And then finally, you have to think about, are you going to extend credit to your customers? How are you expecting them to pay you? And I'll talk a little bit more about that. But again, this is something that you've got to think about, because just as expanding in the United States is not simple and easy, there's costs involved. Same thing for going abroad. They're just a little bit different. You need to have an open mind and willingness to learn. One of the things I just talked about a few minutes ago was that people do things differently abroad. And so what works in the United States may not work when you're selling abroad. So you have to be open to learning new ways of doing business, learn the culture of the place you're going. I mean, in the United States, we tend to, sit down, get right to business. Well, you've got other cultures where before they want to talk business, they want to get to know you. They want to know your family. So potentially there may be a family commitment. Your spouse might want to be involved in this, particularly if you're going to a country where they're going to want and wine and dine you to get to know you before they do business with you. And finally, you need to have patience. This won't happen overnight. And, again, it's not really different than anywhere else in the U.S. That stuff doesn't just immediately fall in your lap, but it's something that you need to think about before you get moving. Now, you've made a decision to export, so you've got to think a bit about what do you need in order to get started exporting. So you will need to know, in particular, a lot about your customer. I mean, who are you trying to sell to? Is it, what age group are they in? What kind of income do they need to have buy your product or service? Are you selling to people in cities and looking to sell people in a more rural area? It all depends on your product, but you really need to know who is your customer going to be, because that's going to help you determine how you market, how you can price your product, how to position your company in that market. Next thing is you want to work on identifying a market. You're not going to want to go everywhere at once. I always think it's great when people come in really enthused. They want to sell to a whole bunch of different places. They've heard of interest there. But it's really good to get your feet wet in a couple of easy markets. I mean, I'm from Canada, and oftentimes, particularly for non-Hispanic businesses, that's a great market to get started in. They speak the same language, so you don't have any language barriers. The business culture is very similar. We have a free trade agreement between our two countries, and so that's really a natural place to start. if you're already fluent in Spanish, or perhaps you speak Portuguese, then again, looking to our neighbor to the south in Mexico is a great place to get started. Again, you don't have that language barrier. You've got people who know the U.S. well. You've got easy transportation between the two countries. So that might be where you want to get started. Or maybe you've got connections in the Caribbean. Florida has a real advantage being right beside where the closest part of the world really, and obviously in the United States to the Caribbean. Take advantage of that proximity that we enjoy, and get started somewhere like that first, and then start looking at, well, how do you want to expand? And you can have those plans already about, these are the markets I want to get started in, and then I want to go to these, if things work well in these markets, and I'll go to the next markets. That's great to have those longer term plans, but really try to get started. I guess, as they say, the best way to eat an elephant is one bite at a time. Don't plan on how you're going to conquer the world from day one. What you have to do is have a specific plan to take off basically bite-sized chunks of that. You also need to know in those markets what are the local laws and regulations. So we're going to have to deal with what happens at the border. Do you need to have specific labeling for the product in that market? Do you have to pay a tariff? So that's basically a border tax. For those who might not be familiar really with what a tariff is. Are there specific standards or certification you need to have in order to be able to sell into that market? There's definitely going to be standards for most products. Certification, not as often, but if you do need to have, let's say you've got you're wanting to sell oranges and you need to have that USDA certificate saying that they don't have any specific pests or that your product doesn't have anything above a certain residue level of a pesticide. Those are things you need to know beforehand, because again, it's going to have a cost, and it's also going to determine how easy it is for you to get into that market. Pricing is going to be important. You got to think about, are you going to make your prices in US dollars or local currency? Obviously, US dollars are a lot easier to deal with. You don't have to worry about foreign exchange rates. However, looking at it from the other perspective, a lot of customers might think, well, I don't really want to buy US dollars if I don't have to. So you'll have an easier time making those sales when you do it in the local currency. But if you do that, then you have different ways of dealing with foreign exchange risk. You can do, there's, again, service providers who will help you with this. It could be your bank, it could be a foreign currency professional that will allow you to forward contract in order to be able to guarantee what the exchange rate is when you're actually making the sale. You also want to make sure that when you're pricing, you include all costs. Sometimes a company won't really think that much about shipping beforehand, and it ends up being a lot more expensive than they had expected. Also, salespeople might not be thinking about, well, is there a tariff at the border? And where your product was making a good profit, all of a sudden you might be selling at a loss if you didn't calculate having to pay a tariff at the border. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a minute in terms of what happens at the border. But these are things that you need to take into account when pricing that are different from what you may be experiencing here in the U.S. You need to think about what sales methods or channels are you going to use. Are you planning, in particular, are you planning to export yourself? Are you looking to sell directly to consumers there, potentially by a website? Are you looking to sell directly to businesses, to a retailer, for example? That's something you've got to think about. Or are you going to outsource? Just one thing to mention on a website, if you are planning on selling directly to consumer, you need to think about the website you're going to offer. I mean, even somewhere like Canada, a website that's search engine optimized for the US may not be search engine optimized for Canada. There might be slight difference in words that they use or spelling, and maybe differences in searches. So again, there's services that can help you with that, but it's something you need to think about. The other possibility would be to outsource sales to a sales representative or a distributor. Is that something you want to do? I mean, you're losing a certain amount of control there, and particularly if you're using a distributor, you may be giving up some of your intellectual property rights. There's not a right or wrong answer to this. It's just something you need to think about. One issue, we've had some great presentations at the CFITO by Nate Friends, who is a great foreign contracts attorney who works at SCORE, again, at the National Entrepreneur Center with us. And one thing I learned from him is you really need to know the local employment law if you are going to be using a distributor or sales representative, because the laws there may be different than they are in the US. You gave an example of Germany, where you may think that, well, okay, it's not working out, I can just terminate the contract and we'll both walk away from it. But there might be a local law that says, well, these people are really deemed to be your employees, therefore you need to pay them a certain amount in order to buy out of the contract, which you didn't realize. Again, there's people who can help you with this, but these are questions that you need to be thinking about when you're looking at exporting that you might not otherwise have thought of. And then it's really important to know the terms of your contract. In particular, it comes to interpretation of the contract. The contract that you have with a client in Brazil may be interpreted differently in Brazil than it would be in the US. So these are things you really need to know before you get started selling into those markets. And this is where working with an attorney who is familiar with those markets and contract law in those markets is really important. If that's, again, it depends on how you're going to be selling. Now, what do you need to do in terms of shipping? How are you going to get the product to your customer? I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on Incoterms. People give multi-hour presentations on those, but it's just a term to be aware of. Basically, it is internationally agreed contracting terms, and that govern effectively where ownership passes of a product that is being exported. So, you may want your customer to pick it up at the point of production. You may want to have control over the entire process and be the one who delivers it right to the customer's point of delivery, or anywhere in between. You might be dropping it off at dockside in the US. You could be dropping off at dockside in the destination market. You might be getting it through customs, and then they'll have a truck to pick it up on the other side of customs. There's a whole different set of conditions that you can have, and it's important to know that when you're dealing with a client that's abroad, they may just use the term and assume that you know what they're talking about, and you might not fully understand what you're getting yourself into, and this can have a cost to you, because obviously if you've got to pay for shipping and getting it through customs, that's going to be much different than if you don't have to worry about anything other than giving it to someone who's picking it up at your point of production. You got to think about how you're going to distribute it in the market. Are you going to want to do this as if you're selling directly to a consumer? Are you going to want to have a distribution center there? Are you going to use a distribution service where you might ship? You might be using something like Alibaba in China to distribute, which is similar to Amazon here. Again, a question to think about. Maybe you might have some different packaging requirements that are going to be different for sea cargo as opposed to a truck. You might be used to sending your product within an hour or two, or maybe across the U.S., but it's quite different for a truck that's going along fairly flat, stable roads, not going to get bumped around all that much, as opposed to sea cargo where rough seas and being in a hot container for a month could have an impact on your product. So you may need to get refrigerated. If you're sending candles to Europe, well, if they're going to be in the hot sun in the summer on the sea, well, they might melt if you have them in a regular container, but you can get a refrigerated container, for example. So these are just things, again, to think about when getting ready to export. Another issue could be whether you need an export license. Most products don't, but you may sell a restricted product, and these are things you have to know before you export, because if it turns out that you do need an export license and you haven't got one, that can cause a lot of headaches for your company. So you need to find out if the product is restricted. If you're selling military goods, that's probably going to be under the International Trade in Arms Regulation, ITAR. Dual-use products would be covered under the Export Administration Regulations. That's probably where most of the products would be covered. I'm not going to go into all the details about how to find out what your export control number would be, whether it is covered. I'm happy to help out with this. There's other service providers who can help as well. It's just something that you need to be thinking about beforehand and deciding how you want to export. You need to look at, are you selling into a country with restrictions? For example, North Korea may be a complete ban on selling to that country. Iran would be another example, Cuba. So then if that's what your market's going to be, it's not impossible to sell, but it's going to be very difficult to do so. Similarly, are you selling to a person who is subject to trade restrictions? My colleague at the U.S. Commercial Service always likes to give the example of, you might be thinking selling a pencil to Canada is going to be no problem, but if you're selling it to someone called Osama bin Laden, even though the real one is dead, it still can raise red flags. And so you really need to know who it is that you're selling to. There's databases where you can look this up quite easily. Again, I'm happy to show people how to do this, but it's, again, something to be aware of. Another issue would be, how do you plan on protecting your intellectual property? You might be looking at licensing in another market, and so you're going to want to talk to an attorney about how to do that properly. If you're going to be selling yourself directly or even through a distributor, well, you may need to get a copyright or a patent on the product in that market. You might want to think about future markets as well, and not only think, okay, well, if I sell it to this one market, I'm going to be fine selling there, but then somebody else from China sees this product, thinks it's terrific, goes, buys one from you, and starts making themselves and selling it into a bunch of other markets that you've been planning on selling into at a future date, then that's going to be a problem for you, because they might even copyright it before you get into those markets. So think about what your future plans are, and take that into account when you're protecting your copyright. Insurance is something you will need. There's export credit insurance, so that's effectively making sure that you get paid at the end of the day. One of the great things with having export credit, and particularly for each specific customer, is that you get basically a second background check on that client or on the country that you're selling into, because any insurer like Ex-Im Bank or the SBA is not going to want to insure payment from a buyer who is a severe credit risk. They want to make sure they get paid at the end of the day, so they're going to be doing their homework, and that's going to give you an extra level of assurance that the client that you're selling to is a good one. You also will need shipping insurance, depending, again, this goes back to the Incoterms, where you are going to be delivering or where ownership is going to pass. If they're picking up at your front door, well, obviously that's not an issue, but if you're going to be delivering it to them or to the port at the destination, well, you need to make sure you've got insurance for that, because if the ship goes down, you're not going to get any money from the ship owner for that. Then you need to think a bit more about payment methods. How do you want to be paid? I mean, obviously there's the issue, as I mentioned earlier, about foreign exchange, but the payment terms are going to be important. Do you want cash in advance and to be paid before you ship the product? Obviously that is the safest one, and it's going to make you the happiest because you know that you're going to be paid. On the other hand, looking at it from the buyer's perspective, they probably don't want to pay for something that they may not have for another month, or that may be delivered to them in less than perfect condition, but they've already paid for it. Now they've got to try and recoup their loss. So that may make sales more difficult, or a client only willing to pay a lower price. So there's terms like that, letters of credit, having an open account with a client, documentary collections, which is kind of like a letter of credit, except it still is up to the buyer whether they will pay. You might be selling things on consignment. These, again, are all things to think about when you're deciding how you want to be paid and how you want to make your sales. Finally, I just mentioned here the U.S. Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. Just because something may be a custom in a particular country, you're still going to be responsible. You can't, start paying an official to move product more quickly through the border. And this also applies to your agents. So, like, if you've got a distributor there who's working for you, and they are the ones paying the bribe at the border, well, you're going to be responsible for that. Or if they're making gifts to government officials in order to get a government contract, again, you can be responsible for that. So it's just something to be aware of when you are getting into exporting. So you've had a lot of information there. Hopefully I haven't scared everybody off of exporting by talking about what's involved. But as I said earlier, you're not in this by yourself. CFITO is here to help do one-on-one counseling for you. We can talk to you about some of these questions. I'm not going to have every single answer that is needed. However, I will be able to help you get in contact with people who do have the answer for you. But we'll help you go through that process of deciding whether international trade is right for you and how to become export ready. We also put on various workshops, currently more webinars. We've had to pivot as well to having a virtual presence as opposed to doing events in person that we did before, but I'm looking forward to the day that we're able to do the in-person events again. We help connect you to opportunities. If we have a foreign delegation coming in or people who are looking to buy in the Central Florida area, then we will put them in contact with various organizations like the African American Chamber. And we help connect you to resources. We'll help identify resource partners who can help you export, and then to also help you become prepared to maximize your benefit in your initial interactions with them, to make sure you've basically answered all the questions for yourself that they're going to be asking of you before you go in and meet with them. And so just to finish off, I'll talk a little bit about some of the services that are available to help you get exporting. There are different, and when I'm talking about the service providers here, I'm talking primarily about government service providers. So the U.S. Commercial Service is probably the biggest one that you would be dealing with. They're the ones, if you think of someone having like being a commerce officer in an embassy, a U.S. embassy abroad, that's going to be part of the U.S. Commercial Service network. Some of their services are free. They had a number of services that were free, and I think they've just started charging for them again, but the charges are based on business size, and they're really not that expensive for what you're getting. So business matchmaking is one of the big ones that both they and Enterprise Florida do. They'll help you to make contacts with reliable buyers of your product in the market that you're looking to go into. And that's also helpful in terms of determining whether it's not going to be a good market. The service, for example, from the U.S. Commercial Service is called the Gold Key Service. If they tell you, well, sorry, we can't offer the Gold Key service to you because we don't believe that there's going to be sufficient buyers in the market for your product, that's going to be a major help for you, and avoid having to spend a lot of time traveling to a market, trying to establish yourself there, and then just to find out that, well, there's not really people wanting to do business for you. A lot of this is being done virtually right now. That has obviously benefits and detractions. It's great because now you don't have to travel as much, and there's not that expectation that you travel to meet your customer. On the other hand, I think everyone recognizes that doing business in person is something you just can't get the feel for the person you're dealing with as well over a Zoom call or a telephone call as you do when you're in person. There's also international company profiles, which is basically a background check that some of these service providers can perform, and those are really great if you want to be extra sure that the person that you're dealing with is going to be a good customer, or if you're looking at a distributor. The various embassies around the world, one of the greatest assets they have are their local engaged staff. They have people who work there for years, and they have terrific contacts in the local community, the local business community, and they will use those to help evaluate whether this is a good company to deal with, so that you're not just relying on, say, a Dun & Bradstreet report on them, or Googling them online. They'll know if they've had problems paying in the past, or if these have been really stellar customers for U.S. exporters. They're going to be able to tell you that. It's a great service that's available. If you are looking to make a proposal for a foreign government contract, they can actually go and advocate for your proposal to those governments. Obviously they're going to advocate for other potential U.S. suppliers as well. So it would not be only for yours, but if you're the only U.S. Bidder on a project, they'll be out there for you. And having a U.S. government official, it can be, the ambassador may go and speak to the minister in charge of that project to let them know how important it is that they have a great U.S. company to do the work for them. They may even host an event for you if you're going over there to do the marketing. It's a really great way to use the embassy as your sales team. And this is, again, just for foreign government contracts. They won't go and advocate for you for just a general sales to another company. There's a lot of trade grants that are available in order to help you get exporting. These are offered by Enterprise Florida. So they'll pay to help you participate in certain trade shows. They'll have trade missions and will have certain financial support for you. Just so you know, with most of these, you don't get the money in advance. You will get it at the back end after the trade mission or after the trade show has taken place. then they'll provide the money. So you still have to come up with the money up front for participating in these. They have a grant. I talked a little bit earlier about potentially having to have some sort of certification. You might have to register your product in Europe, for example. They'll have registration requirements. The CE mark is what it's called. It's basically a label saying that it meets the European standards. They will help fund the costs that you have for getting that registration. They have a product. They have a website localization grant that helps make localizing your website. I think it's you'll end up paying $4,000 for 2 markets. And if they're doing, say, you want to do a website in Colombia, it's going to be search engine optimized for Colombia. And then if the other one happens to be Chile, it'll same thing. So they don't just produce one translation for you. They're really making sure that it's translated for the market and it's search engine optimized for that market. Another great service, or again, another one of our National Entrepreneur Center colleagues, and that is the export marketing strategy that is done by the Florida SBDC at UCF. They have a terrific product that helps you determine where you want to be selling your product. Again, this is for somebody who's export ready, but they'll sit down with you. It's a multi-month process. They'll find, where are going to be the best prospects for you, and then do a deep dive into those markets for you. And then that will also include having a gold key service with the MC in that market. So it's a really great product. I think at the end of the day, it ends up costing about $500 after the grant from Enterprise Florida. And this is something that you could easily pay $20,000, $30,000 for if you're going for it in the private sector. There's also mentorship by successful exporters. In addition to my work with the Central Florida International Trade Office, I happen to be the Vice Chair for Trade Policy at the District Export Council, which is established by the Department of Commerce to assist with our local export assistance centers. And so we've got 30 members on the deck, and they're from a variety of businesses that are involved in exporting, and they'll have someone who's able to help mentor you with getting started exporting. If you're having a problem exporting, we can probably find someone who's going to be able to provide you with that free advice on that. And finally, this one's a bit different from all the other ones because it's not a government service, but your best friends are going to be the third-party logistics companies. So it's a fancy way about talking about what you might think of as a shipping company. They'll have a broker to help you understand what you need to do in order to get your product into the country, and they will get it from your point of delivery to the point of delivery in the most efficient way, the best, most cost effective. They'll work with you as to, what is it that you want to get out of this? Is cost what's going to be the main driver? Is it you need to deliver by a certain date? They're the ones who you're going to want to have a great relationship with because they will be in a position to make things move and to do so at the lowest possible cost to you. So with all that, hopefully I have helped you start thinking about exporting as being a great way for you to be able to grow your business, to pivot away from what you may have been doing previously and help stay in business through COVID. I think probably a lot of people will have heard about supply chains and some of the problems that have occurred in terms of shipping. Really, from what I hear now, there's really not many problems, particularly for exporting in terms of shipping. Obviously, there's a lot more coming in from China right now, particularly in terms of PPE. So if you're looking to bring something from China, it might be problematic. But to get something there, it's not going to be an issue. The one other issue I'll just mention in terms of shipping is, and I don't know the latest on this, but because so much of the products that were shipped, I think it's about 60%, that were shipped by air, were going in the belly of passenger planes. With that not taking place as much, the prices for shipping by air went up quite a bit because there just wasn't the same volume available. I know it's going down, but I don't know how far down it's come. But all this to say, exporting is really a great way to grow your business and manage risk. And it won't be easy. It might seem scary, but I hope you've learned that you will not be on your own. There is a lot of us here who want to help you, whose jobs it is to help your business get into exporting, to grow through exports. And so hopefully it's something that you're going to be seriously considering as you decide how you want to pivot and retool to meet the post-COVID demand. So thank you. Here's my contact information, and I look forward to any questions you may have.
Thank you, Chris, for such an informal, thought-provoking presentation. So you might have scared us away, but I don't think so. There's a lot of light bulbs going off. So I'm going to jump right into the questions and bring those to your attention. The first one would be, does your office disclose export imports of public record?
If the issue is, do we share information about clients with anyone else, then no, we wouldn't. I mean, we might talk about a success that we've achieved in general terms, but we're not going to tell other people that, well, you know, this company has sold this product at this price level to someone else. And to be honest, when you're getting down to that level of detail, you'll probably be working with something like the U.S. Commercial Service, because I'm really there to get people started, and then it will be the U.S. Commercial Service that has that network that's going to help you make the sales, and then I'll be involved as much as you'll allow me to be.
Okay. And I have another one to say, is it true that the U.S. lends money to certain countries to buy U.S. products?
Well, there's really two answers to that. If you're looking at lending to a government, like if it was, there can be financing by the U.S. government to help make those sales. Oftentimes, when they tender a contract, a foreign government will actually have a requirement in there that the seller of the service or product comes in with a certain percentage of financing for them. And so that's one potential place where it'd be loaned to a country. Similarly, there's certain different agencies that will help, and financing can be part of that assistance if it's a developing country that, you know, really we're looking at more than just a trade issue, that we're helping them to develop infrastructure. The other would be in terms of lending to companies there, and that's the same answer, that yes, they'll help finance the purchase of U.S. products and services through the Ex-Im Bank and the SBA. And there's also, just to make people aware, that they're not the only ones who do this. There's private lenders as well who will do this. A lot of banks won't really want to touch foreign sales just because of the additional risk and, you know, their unfamiliarity with the markets. But larger banks and specific service providers will help finance exports to those countries.
Okay, and the final question, I think you touched on it at the end of your presentation, but they had questions about mentorship and training for businesses who are interested in starting and exporting with no experience. If they have no experience to that particular field, do you have that mentorship program or training program that they can enlist in?
I guess we'll have, you know, whether it be me talking to them, whether it be someone from one of the other service providers, or whether it be a mentor from from the District Export Council. I mean, I'm a great place to start with help identifying who it is who's going to be able to help someone get started exporting. And hopefully the presentation today would be a great place to start with that. Like, start thinking about all those issues that I've raised, and maybe that will create more questions that you want to talk about. And again, I'll have some of the answers, and if not, I'll have the people who I can direct you to find those answers.
Right. I'm going to tell you, the spark for me was the 75% of the global wealth being outside the United States. You had my attention at that. So,
yeah, that is really important. I mean, I think, we've got a terrific market here in the U.S. And, some people might think along North American lines, and, that's a really big market too. But the world beyond those markets is just so important. And ultimately, at the end of the day, all the assistance you will need. I mean, some people want to do it all by themselves. And well, frankly, I would say that's probably not a great way to get started. Once you're comfortable in a market, maybe you'll need less assistance. But the assistance that's available really is going to be a cost of doing business. I mean, as a business owner, you probably have people doing sales. You're going to probably have people doing the manufacturing. Those are all costs of business. And being able to export is similarly, at the end of the day, you can make it about, what's it going to cost you to have somebody do that for you. And once you determine that, is it worth going into those markets? Will they support the price that you need to charge in order to pay for those services?
All right, Chris. Well, I appreciate your contribution, and thank you for your presentation. And I'm going to turn this over to our president, Tanisha Gary.
You say my name and I quickly appear. Well, I want to thank both of our presenters this morning, both Paul Shelton of Warwick Shores Advisors, as well as Chris Leggett, who is our neighbor at the National Entrepreneur Center with the Central Florida International Trade Office. Both of them for very engaging presentations. And I encourage all of our attendees, first, thank you for joining, but I encourage you to follow up if you have more questions. The contact information Chris did provide it, and if you'd like to reach Mr. Shelton, please just let us know and we'll get you in touch with him as well. And of course, thank you to our sponsor for part one of our 3-part boot camp series. Thank you to Wells Fargo and to Will for being our moderator and joining us this morning. We do have some events here at the Chamber that I'd like to tell you all about. We have a Get in the Game, our first golf outing, along with our golf clinic. So if you don't know how to play the game of golf like me, you can come and join us in the clinic where we will have a PGA master there to teach us the basics of golf. That is October 26th, starting at 8 a.m. Please visit our website to sign up. And I'd love to see you all out there on October 26th at the Alaqua Lakes Golf and Country Club in Seminole County, where we will get in the game of golf and we will do it safely. We also have our 3-part boot camp that's coming up. Another part will be in November, as well as the final part will be in December. Please visit our website to follow up and to sign up for those 2 webinars, as well as our annual State of the Chamber address will be on November 5th from 9 to 10 a.m. Please join myself along with my board members and my current board chair, Leticia Adams, as we take a look at 2020 and what's ahead in 2021. So please make sure you register for that event. And if you're not a member of our chamber, let's go back. That's really important. If you're not a member of our chamber, we encourage you to please sign up and join by visiting our website at www.blackcommerce.org. Also, please sign up to receive our monthly newsletter as well as our extras so you can keep in contact and know what's going on with the chamber. Let's see, next slide, please. And then don't forget to sign up and to join us for our first virtual day of shopping, which will be November 30th, which is Cyber Monday, the Monday after Thanksgiving. You'll hear and see from some of our chamber members about goods and services that they have to offer. We want to make sure that we support our own, and that'll be a virtual day of shopping on November 30th. So again, thank you all so much for joining us, and we hope that you have a wonderful rest of the day. You see all of our social media handles here. Please follow us on social media and continue to engage with us. Bye-bye.